Not yet. Okay. It started to record. I am going. All right. 40 minutes. Let's start now.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Daniel. I'm a software developer by day and by night as well. I've been a technical architect for the past 3.5 years. Um, and I've been in the Salesforce space for about 8 years. So today I'm going to present to you my solution for the laptops to school scenario. And today's agenda, it's very short. I'm going to give a brief overview of the company, systems landscape. We're going to talk about the data and security model and the actors and licenses involved in the system for Salesforce specifically. And then I'm going to list all the requirements and my solutions and considerations for those solutions. And finally, I'm going to close with some remarks. So, Laptops to School is a nonprofit organization that receives donated laptops from a number of corporations, and they allocate them to either schools or recycling companies, which they sell for profit. Um, Laptops to Schools also operates in the US and Europe, and it's organized into 12 country-based regions. And they have two shipping receiving hubs based in Denver and Paris. And they also have received donations from corporations in a volume of 300 laptops per month. They're looking to automate and scale their processes. Um, so, um, so this is their current landscape. On the right, you'll see the inventory system, the shipping fulfillment system, and they have also a cloud storage system. And they want to migrate or move into a Salesforce solution that's integrated with the current systems. The current systems also involve an identity um, um, provider that uses Active Directory to store the identities of their internal users. Um, the current system also, the inventory system is web-based, and it's accessible to the internal users within their private network. Um, the solution that I'm proposing is to integrate Salesforce with all these systems via an enterprise service bus or a middleware um, that will integrate Salesforce with their inventory system and their shipping fulfillment system. Um, uh, the the integration between Salesforce and the government estimator website to get the estimated values per laptop. Um, this is going to move from the current uh, process, which involves the internal users to use the inventory system and the government estimator. So from now on, the internal users will use Salesforce as their inventory system, and all the interactions will happen within Salesforce and will be managed either directly to the government estimator or via the ESB middleware. Um, Internal users will leverage single sign-on via their internal identity provider, and Salesforce. School staff members will access Salesforce communities via their web browser. They can also, I missed the line here between Facebook, Twitter, and the volunteers. They can also use their Facebook and Twitter credentials to authenticate into the system, as well as the staff members. And the volunteers, finally, they can access the cloud storage system via their their web browser. Sorry. Volunteers can also use their mobile application, which will be Salesforce One, to connect to Salesforce community. In the data model, we have accounts and contacts, and we're going to leverage person accounts for volunteers. A business account will be a donating corporation and recycling corporations and schools. The sharing model for these objects will be private. We have a data volume for approximately 7,000 accounts plus the volunteers space, which it's 1,000 users approximately. It's an estimate. And then we have the laptop custom object, which will also be private, and we will have a master detail relationship for donating corporations. And we have some lookup relationships for recycling allocations and school allocations. And finally, we have a lookup to a volunteer. The data volume for this object will be significantly high over the time. So I'm going to recommend some large data volume best practices around this object. All the current information in the system will also be migrated over to Salesforce. That will require some migration strategies. And moving forward, I'm going to propose a real-time synchronization from Salesforce to the inventory system and the shipping system in real time in one way. So all the data or the master data will be Salesforce, will be considered to be Salesforce. These are the actors and licenses that I've identified. In the internal side, we have the donation coordinators, IT specialists, allocation coordinators, and managers. They will all be using full Salesforce Sales Cloud license. In the external side, we have volunteers, which will use the customer community user license. The reason why I chose the customer community license is because there's a low volume of this user that it's supported, and they don't require access to objects not specified in the data model. They will have access to the records that they are assigned to, and they will have access to laptops via sharing sets. So the sharing model for this user will be very simple. Moving on, we have the virtual experts, which can leverage the Chatter Plus license. They don't have, they don't require access to laptops or any of that information, but they do require access to forum-like answer response type of experience. So I'm proposing China Plus for that. So the school staff does have some reporting requirements, and for that reason, I'm recommending Customer Community Plus licenses. Plus, their volume is not considerably high, so I think it's the best license to leverage in this case. Then there are donating carp users and recycling carp users. They don't need a license. They can access the system via publicly or guest user experience. They're not going to be authenticated users in the system. The students, they can also interact with virtual experts in a forum-like base, so I'm also recommending the Charter Plus license for them. So here, the initial requirements for the inventory system and their problems that they're facing. Currently, they have duplicated recycling company records. For that reason, as I stated before, we're going to migrate all the existing data into Salesforce, and moving forward, we're going to sync the data from Salesforce to the inventory system. We're going to also enable some duplicate rules to avoid those scenarios. We are going to also leverage the data, the current system, the inventory system as a redundancy system due to some government requirements, government audits that will happen. So for that reason, we need to replicate the data into the inventory system. So this system will not be decommissioned at all. I'm also assuming that the inventory system supports bulk data loads, and that the data doesn't need to be transformed considerably. The data structure that we have in Salesforce will be easily matchable in the inventory system. Another requirement is that the Allocation coordinators can run manual reports, manual imports using CSV files. Sorry, there's a typo. But currently, their import process incur in some inconsistencies in the CSV formats. Therefore, I'm going to suggest to develop a custom form to enable to be enabled in the community. This will be, as we will see later, this will be a web-to-lead form, which will, if I may just go back here, this I am missing the lead object here. I can add that later. So my solution will contemplate public access to that web-to-lead form. This form also allows them to enter multiple laptops per request. So we most likely have a link between lead and laptop, and there will be create access for the guest user. for the laptop. The allocation coordinator manually updates the inventory system, and they can sometimes select incorrect schools or third-party recycling companies. So for that, we're going to automate the assignment process based on some business rules that can be modeled through, we'll see that later, but they can be modeled through a combination of validation rules, process builder flows, and formula fields. The configuration profile, well, the profile will need to be configured and the page layout to restrict access to the lookups for the schools and recycling company allocation. If the business rules cannot be automated, we can consider using lookup filters and some other validation rule approaches. The inventory system must be kept in place. Therefore, we're not going to decommission the system. However, the system of record will be the Salesforce, and we'll leverage the real-time integration as I stated before. All the inventory systems should be updated, automated. Therefore, the responsibility will be assigned to the ESP for that. The application and donation intake requirements will be done via another web-to-lead form, a different one, which will be accessed by schools. The lead object will include all the necessary fields to capture the school's request for laptops. The corporation intake, as I said before, will be a web-to-lead form. It could be also a custom visual force page or a Lightning component. I'm sticking to the web-to-lead form because all the information can be entered in the lead object. The form will allow them to enter multiple laptop details and some custom forms that can use Apex. I should say Apex triggers to load the data accordingly, or to map the data to the laptops accordingly. This is considering that the current process requires the corporations to send a CSV file. So moving forward, they should agree to use this form instead of sending the CSV file. Donation coordinators will run will no longer need to import manually and create a shipping record. However, we will need to automate the creation of the shipping record in the shipping system via the ESB. And for that, we will rely on the ESB when we send the inventory, the new inventory request. We will also send the shipping request. I'm also assuming that the shipping system exposes web services, which then they can be accessed by the ESB. Some large corporations need to be able to add additional details regarding the end of life of the laptops. So we will add those as fields, custom fields on the lead object. When the laptops arrive at the hubs, the IT specialist verify for PII data. If so, then we need to notify the security team. So we will add a flag on the laptop to indicate that the laptop has PII data. If that happens, we will use a process builder flow to assign the laptop to a queue. The queue will be used to send an email with the details of the laptop. Anyone in the queue will read that email and they can access their queue, their queue list view for laptops, and they can assign the laptop to themselves in the security team. The security team reviews the laptop and sends an email to the corporation if it includes PII data, requesting them to confirm if they want the hardware, the hard drive to be shipped back, or if they consent the deletion of the files. So we will leverage send email publisher action on the laptop record. The security team user will send that email over to the corporation, which they will have access to, and they will include all the necessary information in the email. So it's going to be a manual process for the security team user. If the corporation doesn't reply within 5 days, the security team should be notified, and they will have 24 hours to delete the files. So for that, we're going to also use a process builder flow on the laptop, which will have a time-based action checking for the PII flag, and we will also use another pick list field, which will determine the action, whether it's a return or a deletion of the files. So if that field is empty, we will send an email to the laptop owner, which by that time will be the security team user. Then the security team user, if the user deletes the file from the laptop, they have to remove the PII flag from the laptop and assign to the previous IT specialist. So this will also assume that we have another lookup, that I missed in my diagram. So we'll have another lookup here, previous IT specialist, which will be used using, again, a process builder flow, will be used to assign the owner of the laptop to that user as the IT specialist reference. Finally, if the PII is not removed, we would need to assign the record to the user's manager. So again, we can use process builder flow to set the laptop owner to the current owner's manager reference. This will most likely be also a time-based action according to the previous requirement. The IT specialist add details on the laptop. and that will determine if the laptop should be destined for donation to school or for recycling. So for that, we will add, we will leverage some custom fields on the laptop, and a formula field will calculate if it needs to be donated or recycled. If they are, if they need to be donated, um, we need to assign a monetary value that comes from a government side. So we can use a process builder flow with an Apex action to call out the government website automatically and get the monetary value, which will be a custom field on the laptop as well. I'm assuming that the website can be accessed from Salesforce, and we don't like. There's no requirement currently that states that the the updates should be in bulk. But if so, then I'm assuming that the web service supports both requests. The destination of the monetary value updates the inventory system. Again, we will leverage the ESB to update the inventory system the same way. And we will also need to update the shipping system. Later on, we'll see that. If the laptop is assigned to a school, an allocation consultant or recycling coordinator will be um, will be need, will need to be assigned to the record based on the volume and based on the region. So for that, we will have a number of queues organized by region and whether they are for school donations or recycling. And we will use omnichannel to assign the laptop based on current volume. Alternatively, we can use a trigger to calculate the assignment. I'm just suggesting to use the declarative tool to avoid additional programmatic approaches. The the third-party requirement, the third-party recycling company needs to be determined based on the average dollar amount that they have paid historically. So we will need to use a roll-up summary on the recycling company record. And for that reason, that's why I suggested to use a master detail relationship here. The laptop to schools would like to give the recycling companies access to enter rates that they will pay. So we can use a custom object to store this data. However, I think we can give them. They will need access. They will need some authenticated access. Sorry, this contradicts what I said before about the licenses, but they will need some authenticated access to the to a community, which they can give. They can have some other way. I'm going to stick to my initial recommendation, and I'm going to say that instead they should access a web to lead form with some different parameters, and we will have some internal some process builder flows or triggers that will add their information accordingly. And that information can be reported on, so we can build reports to determine the rates that they will pay for specific laptop models. This information can be aggregated in the account object. However, if there are this is assuming that there are few models that they would pay for. If they need to support a large number of models, then we will need another object, another custom object here. So moving forward, we have allocation coordinators to see the top 3 recommended recycling companies. Again, as I just said, with a custom report, they can get the top 3 recycling companies based on the average monetary value that they would pay. When a recycling company is selected, the inventory system will be updated. So similar approach as before, a process builder plus an Apex class to call out the ESB and update the inventory system. The reason why I'm suggesting process builder and Apex is because considering that the outbound messages and the current workflow rules will be deprecated, so I don't want to add future overhead when we need to migrate these over to Process Builder and Apex. So on the allocation and shipping requirements, we have the schools inventory system that need to receive laptops in the past 12 months. So we will have a custom report for that, and we can optimize the allocation logic using if the school has received more than 500 laptops in the current year, we will use an approval process, and the approval process will have some entry criteria. So not all allocations will require approval. If we needed to automate the approval, we can use a trigger to require approval and lock the record if they need to if the allocated school needs to be approved. So they assign a volunteer and the skills based on skills, and they also like to track their performance. So we would send a survey using the standard Salesforce survey, and we will set up skills for volunteers. When they finish the allocation, they will need to send a letter. So we would use again Process Builder to send a letter to the volunteer and the school. This will require multi-language to be enabled to be sent the notification on their local language. When all the laptops are allocated, we would need to send a tax donation letter to the donating corporation, so we would use Process Builder for that across email template. So the setup, so arriving the laptops to the schools, they will need to be e-signed. So we would leverage an e-signature application from the App Exchange, and that will update and create an event to schedule the visit for the volunteer to set up the laptop at the school. The volunteer checks in to the school using their Salesforce One. We could also develop a custom page, Visualforce page, that will let them check in fewer steps. The volunteer would download the software from the cloud storage system. So I'm assuming that they will have access, some kind of access. SSO access is not a requirement, but if they needed separate authentication, they are provisioned in the system as such. The volunteers need to track the software that they install, so they will enter the information in the laptop record. The laptop access, the record access for them is granted via sharing set, as I said before, and they need to collaborate with other volunteers. So they have we will enable chatter in the community for that. Schools need to send a thank you video to the donating company, so they will be able to access the community via their mobile browser, which will allow them to upload the file from there. Laptop to School like to provide students with access to forum-like questions. So this will be out of the box using the chatter feature in the community for students and virtual experts. So accessibility, right? So corporations cannot see each other's records. So by setting the account or by default to private, they will not be able to see other corporations' data. Designated contacts at corporations can see tagged donation amounts. We will use field level security and custom profiles for that. And the security team and their managers can update the records with PII data. We will use the validation rule for that. And only donation coordinators can edit laptop rates, so we'll configure that at the profile level as well. The donation coordinator should see laptops on the region. That will be managed by the role hierarchy. Internal users can access the system through the intranet and sign in seamlessly. So we will need to set up SSO across the systems. And assuming that we need to set up my domain in Salesforce and configure SAML federated authentication. Laptop to Schools uses Active Directory, and users should be provisioned in the provision automatically. So the identity provider needs to support just-in-time user provisioning. So I'm recommending Identity Connect for that. Volunteers should use Facebook or Twitter for social sign-on, so we'll need to configure authentication providers and registration handlers in the communities. For reporting dashboards for the 10 top corporations, that would be a summary report per corporation and limited to 10 and sorted in a dashboard. The schools need to see history of laptops, so they will have access to reports exposed in the community. And they will also need a list of all software and license expiration. So that's a custom report as well in the community. We need to see a trend report on the number of monetary values per top 10 corporations by quarter over the past 5 years. So it's a custom report filtered by region and date. And group by quarter and some summary on monetary value. So environment strategy will be very simple. We would not require too many environments, or I'm recommending a developer sandbox for all development and configuration tasks. a UAT sandbox for user acceptance and data migration, initial data migration tests, and the production order. Testing strategy, we will have very simple tests. Unit tests will be mandatory as per Salesforce platform. But I am also recommending some user acceptance testing that will require end-to-end testing of the system.
Okay.
Release management will be very basic, and
we have
yeah,
to stop.
That's
Because time's up.
perfect.
Cool. All right. I'm
Thank
just gonna.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to reset the timer for 30 minutes for Q&A. Just bear with me. Okay, Mike, you're still there, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So Q&A starts now. 30 minutes. Let's go.
Okay, kick off. So there's a requirement to let me see. What kind of risks did you identify in the solution?
So yeah, there are two major risks. So the integration that needs to be updated in real time. So every time we make an update on the laptop, that affects the inventory. So we need to update the inventory system. Sometimes we need to update the inventory system and the shipping system at the same time. So that's why I recommended the ESB to handle that, to delegate that responsibility to the ESB. The other risk in terms of data volume, as you can see, this can grow exponentially over the time. So some large data volume strategies that we can put in place that could be using indexes, skinny tables, and because this is a private sharing model, if we needed to import data for whatever reason, we can turn off the process builders temporarily. There are no sharing rules in place. The sharing model is very basic in this solution, so we will not be affected too much by that, but there can be some data skew, so we would need to handle the data loads accordingly by either sorting the data and grouping them in batches to avoid record lock. Another risk is the access to external users. So I'm thinking that the proper access would probably not contemplate some licenses. I'm sticking to my initial decision to not give licenses to recycling corps, but if there are some business rules for that, we'll definitely have to revisit the licenses for this. So I think that could be a risk. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And so could you just clarify the licenses for the donating corp user and the recycling corp user? So there's requirements there that the donating corp can in your solution there, they're logging in and filling out forms for the donation batches. I think also the recycling corp users then can update the rates. So how would they be accessing the system?
Yeah, I'm assuming that they don't really need to update information relevant to their business. It's not part of business continuity. Therefore, they don't really need an authenticated access. We could leverage the guest user on the site, and they could access either a visual force page, or as I said before, they could access a web to lead, which doesn't require um, them to have an authenticated license. I think um, that the volume of intake that we would process from donating corps and recycling corps um, will be very low on a daily basis. So we'll be still within the limits of the platform for what to be forms.
Okay, and your archiving policy there. What point are you recommending that data be archived?
So I'm not recommending data to be archived. Uh, we would like to keep the all the information in Salesforce, as it is the system of record for laptop and corporations and all that. However, we do have some government regulations, some audits that will happen. Therefore, the data will not only not be archived, but will need to be replicated over to the inventory system. Should there be any problems with this number here, we would need to review what would be the regulation, because this is I'm assuming that this is a nonprofit organization, so storage of this historical information would be important. If we were ultimately, if we were to run into big problems with the laptops in Salesforce, with the data in Salesforce, there will not be a problem. We can delete all data from Salesforce, but rely on the data on the inventory system, which will also serve the purpose for audits from the government. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yep. So with the web to lead part of the solution, how would you kind of tackle the duplicates being created there? So the donating company, maybe they donate a couple of batches a month. How do you kind of tie that data back to their account record and kind of make sure that multiple accounts aren't being created each time through that process?
Yeah, so we would probably need some duplicate rules on leads and leads to accounts. However, we would probably use, it would be better to use a CAPTCHA form to avoid spam from third parties, or because this will be exposed to the public. We would need some kind of control for that. Um, there will be an intermediary process that I didn't speak of, but that process will be necessary to convert the lead into an account and convert the lead into a laptop as well to do that. I think that's the major risk, and the way the alternative that we can implement is to use a Visualforce page that will only be accessible. Will also require the recycling companies to use and the donation companies to use a community license for that. Mostly for loading that information.
Okay. And there's a requirement that only certain assigned users are able to view the tax information of companies. How would you manage that in your solution?
We would set up field level security, so it will be non-visible for the rest of the users or the other profiles, and it will only be visible for that specific profile. The in the sense of the letter that we need to send to the corporation, to the donating corporation for taxing purposes, that I'm assuming that it's not regulated. There's no regulation or restriction against that. I'm assuming that the corporation has opted in and consented that they can receive that information via email. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yep. And could you tell me, to describe it in a bit more detail, the kind of roll up on the laptops to show the kind of the average rate paid? So in your entity diagram, a laptop is a specific instance of a laptop, but I think that the requirement was for a specific roll up for a specific kind of model. Could you describe it, how that would work, like where it be kind of rolled up to? And
yeah, so we would have some categories in the laptop. So based on the category and the monetary value, we would have some roll-up field on the account. So the recycling company will have a value based on some criteria that we define in the roll-up summary as well. The alternative to that would be to create a to use an app exchange product or a public library that will work on top of lookup. So we would get rid of this master detail relationship, and we would use a lookup, a regular lookup, and we will roll up the information using that tool or library based on some criteria that will contemplate, the category or the model of the laptop.
okay.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yep. And is there how in your integration diagram how are you securing the integrations themselves? Is there are they potentially kind of open to man in the middle attacks or?
Yeah, so absolutely. So all the users that are participate in the system um, will have uh, will have their own credentials, right? So they, within the context of those users, we will send as part of a transaction, we will send a message to the ESP. The ESP will be behind the firewall, so it will be only exposed to Salesforce via IP waitlisting. That's the first measure of security. It will also be behind firewall. Sorry, it will also be can be authenticated. So we could if the ESB supports could names first and delegate an API only user to authenticate to the ESB every time we do a call out to the ESB, or we could use two-way SSL. Um, uh, yeah, I think that's all. Does that answer your question?
Yep. See. And what are your considerations for the mobile application? How would that be kind of distributed to the users?
So Salesforce supports custom branded Salesforce One version, which they can distribute using a private app store. So that's something that can be done. The volunteers will, however, they will have a community license, and Salesforce One will need to be configured to use the community URL for logging in. After that, it's just business as usual with Salesforce One. I'm also assuming that volunteers kind of like they are, even though they are external users, they kind of like they are part of the organization in a way or another, right? So they can be set up internally if they come into I don't know if they're coming into one of the offices. They can be set up by someone in the organization. They give their mobile and they can be set up. Some probably some recommendations that I can do for the future for the scalability of the solution is that the organization can utilize mobile management, mobile device management. So strategies like bring your own device will allow the corporation to implement some additional security measures like revoking access if they notice that the volunteer's device was stolen or lost. They could also wipe out all the data if it's required. Things like that can be done. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yep. You concluded that omni-channel in your solution. Could you tell us how the kind of licensing for omni-channel works? What part of?
Yeah. So licensing, because the features will be used, because that feature will actually be used for the internal users, so they would have access to that at the moment when the laptop is assigned to an IT specialist, which I'm assuming is a security team. They can assign the laptop to I believe it's a donating corporation user, donating coordinator that belongs to a specific queue. So it would omnichannel. It's I believe it's an out of the box feature for Sales Cloud license. So there would not be any additional add-on charge for that, I think.
Question I have, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you go back to your data model?
Sure.
Sorry, the ERD. Can you explain how do you address the requirement on allocation number 5? When the allocation to the school is finalized, laptop to school would like to automate the following steps.
So the inventory needs to be updated, right? So automatically, and create a shipping record. So in the laptop record, in the laptop object, we'll have a process builder flow and an Apex class that will call out the ESP. The other part of the requirement is that the school and the assigned volunteer receive a letter, right, on their local language. So another criteria within the same process builder can be used to another action within the same criteria of the process builder can be used to send the email. Most likely, the email template would be so it looks like the email template can be very complex, so we could use a Visualforce email template to dynamically bind all the data required. Yeah, that will be triggered when the school, the assigned school lookup has a value. So when it changed from blank to something, that process builder will trigger those two actions.
Okay. How about the number 5? How do you identify that the laptop allocation, the allocation to a school is finalized?
Yeah, like I said, if the lookup has a value, then the allocation is finalized. So if it changes from blank to something, I'm considering that to be finalized. Yes.
Okay. Cool. Next question. How do you address the requirement to enter rates for the recycling companies?
So the recycling company would access a public page. That page will be a web to lead form that can be exposed in a site in Salesforce. That form should be probably enhanced to support the intake of multiple laptops. In which case, we could introduce an aggregate or a child record on the lead object. So we could link the laptop to the lead object. That's an option. Another option by the way, I'm not recommending that option as the first approach. My first approach is to keep all the information within the lead object. So I'm assuming that corporations load small batches. Um, the other option is to not use what to lead, but just a custom Visual Force page with a form that can allow those unauthenticated users create um, to create laptop records,
So,
and they would update they would
sorry.
look up somehow the corporation that they belong to.
So does the recycling users need to log in order to access the page?
You know, I'm not recommending an authenticated access. However, if if um, if there are some regulations or some requirements, then they would need a license, probably a community customer community license for that. But no, in my solution, I'm not. They will not need authenticated access. So again, they would use the guest user profile associated with the site, which will have access to create those records. They can be
Okay,
configured for that.
cool. Next question. How do you track the software installed by the volunteers? I think it's requirement 2.2 on
Uh,
page 6.
yeah. So again, that would be inline data on the laptop record. So um, the most simple approach would be to have some kind of like probably a text area field, and they could enter all the software that they install and the attributes um, the software that they install in there, or they can use chatter, a chatter post, chatter comment
Okay.
to enter all the information.
Okay. Then next question. Reporting requirement 2.1. Sorry, 2.2. How do you address the list of software and license expirations for school users?
You can if the data is formatted in a way that can be organized on those fields, you can report on that. Um, the problem that I see with expiration date would come up. Sorry, I didn't foresee that, but the expiration date would need to be a separate field. Um, in that case, we would not be able to do that in that way. However, um, to stick with the simple approach, we could use some basic charting um, base components from Visual Force to report on the data. That will require that the data uh, from the from the software installed field can be somehow parsed. Um, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Now I'm going to move on to integration. We still have 2 minutes left. How do you address the requirement on the corporation? Some certain corporations with batch CSV files.
So in a similar way, so the corporations will enter um, you know in a web to lead form. They could enter the the information about what they're trying to what they want to donate, and they could also upload a file, a CSV file, the same CSV file that we were talking about. Um, However, we we would still have that problem where some companies would have we would have some companies uploading files with different formats, so the format would be inconsistent. So for that reason, my initial recommendation was to use a very basic web2lead form that will allow them to enter multiple laptop details, but it will be very basic, and probably they would not be able to enter more than, I don't know, 100 or 200 laptop records, which I think it's within the parameters, because as stated by the requirements, they only process 300 laptops per month.
Okay, thank you. Next requirement, how do you address the virtual experts with real-time chat and relevant skill sets?
So the virtual experts, as well as the students, they will have Chatter licenses, and so they can access a community that could be enabled with forum-like capabilities. So they would be able to use Chatter answers, and they could also have people recommending them based on their skills. A feature a feature that could be considered here would be work.com, to allow them to receive recommendations about certain skills that they have.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Actually, we just covered 30 minutes of Q&A. Thank you for that. I am going to stop the recording. Just bear with me.